say the finding a job to match my skill level has been maybe an issue. I was talking with my husband about this yesterday, and we kind of worked out that in the 10 years that I've been here, I only actually had a job to match my skills for 11 months of that time.
I feel like at this point, I feel like that if I'm going to get a position that is fulfilling, a professional position that's fulfilling for myself, that I'm going to have to leave Finland. But I don't know if that's the route that I'm going to take, because like our family is so happy here.
What women commonly speak about is like guilt about going back to work. It's like, should I be there all the time for my child? But I realize I actually really enjoy working. It's a big part of who I am and my identity, because I'm a mother, but I'm also myself, and I enjoy going to work. So I think it was quite crucial for me to be able to be working as well as being a mother.
Because by then my son will be continuing in daycare and I will be free to work, and I actually do miss working. So hopefully by the end of this year I will again be an employed person.
And I must say that no kodinhoitotuki, like this allowance, would have made me stay home, because it's so little, and both times I stayed home only for 10 months. Basically that parental leave time. The second time my partner took also 1 month of leave in the end.
It was a bit really unfair to me that, okay, I have all this international background and I have done a full master's degree in a field which is quite in high demand in the world at the moment. And I speak like 5 languages, and there is no interest, like there is not even one company who is interested in my skills. And I started to lose my self-esteem and confidence and everything.
I'm not going to give up, obviously. I'm not going to go home. And I think that I will continue searching for a job and study languages. And also, if I don't find anything that will be interesting for me, then I would think about opening my own company, because I'm not planning to sit home and to receive this unemployment help. That's like not acceptable option.
Thank you. I agree with Annuka that there are many reasons for this. I would say that there's resistance to change. There's unconscious bias, unawareness, also kind of sticking to the way things have always been done. So not questioning the default requirements, using like old templates when putting together new job posts, and not really critically assessing whether fluent Finnish language skills are truly necessary in a certain post. And there's also confusion related to whether Finnish or Swedish language skills need to be required. So for example, in the public sector, we do have law and requirements related to that, but it doesn't apply to all positions or the private sector. But I want to bring in an optimistic addition to the discussion, because right now at THL and the Finnish Institute for Occupational Health, we have a EU-funded project called Manifold More, and our aim is to improve and increase diversity, especially in expert organizations. And one of the things that we're developing right now is language awareness and language-aware practices for expert organizations. And what we've seen, for example, in our project, we're using like a hybrid model. So we are using English and Finnish side by side. We've agreed and we have written policies that we will use English and Finnish in our meetings. We're co-writing in both languages. We're using translation budget from English to Finnish instead of the other way around. So really trying to find hands-on practical solutions that enable experts who are developing their Finnish skills to be involved and to also have access to an environment where they hear Finnish and where they feel safe to use Finnish. And what we see is that there's a lot of curiosity, excitement, and openness towards trying something like this. So I would say that there are reasons why we still have this problem and why there is resistance. But at the same time, if we have workplaces and companies that are setting an example and showing new ways of working and being inclusive, then there is also openness towards that.
That's a really good point, and I feel like especially the public sector can lead the way in this, because there are also a lot of companies serving the public sector, and very often we hear as one of the reasons why they can't hire like non-fluent Finnish speakers is because they are serving the public sector. So when the public sector starts to lead the way, then very often we can change the whole country in this way. Let's take Vaishali's comment and then move on to the next question. And I just wanted to say here we had some technical problems with starting the recording in the beginning of this meeting, but this meeting will be recorded at the moment and the recording has just started.
Sure. Thanks, Sofia. So I totally agree with what Anuka and Shadia said, but I think organizations play a very important role. And how do we educate the organizations and showing them the importance of diversity and inclusion? So at least at my current company at Accenture, we do lots of research, and the latest research of 2020 was that organizations which focus on inclusion and diversity get 6x times more innovation. And that was done with an interview with almost 300 CIOs and our clients. So I guess it's very important that we as a society, because we all work for organizations, take this as our personal challenge. How do we try to break those barriers and think or get out of our comfort zone? It's always easy to speak to your colleague sitting next in your local language, but how do you try to break that and take a conscious effort and a decision that let's try to bring in more diversity. Let's not make language a hindrance for growth. And at least one practical example I'll tell. So last week, I was doing a workshop on inclusion and diversity for the students of Tampere University on behalf of Accenture. It was a whole day event in Finnish. And then we had this 1 hour slot 2 times with a batch of 50 students to do this workshop on inclusion and diversity. And they asked me to do it in Finnish. And my Finnish is like nowhere, to be honest. And I challenged them. I challenged them that you want a workshop on inclusion and diversity and you still want it in Finnish. Really, guys, is that what you want to do? Let me do this in English. And then the student council agreed. And trust me, there were 100 students clapping at the end that this is the first time in Tampere University they had any workshop in English. And they were asking, how do we attract more international students? You need to break your own comfort zone and get out and do some things which are not normal. Then it will work, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very good insights and points. All right, the next question that we have here is that public conversation around immigration is always carried out looking at individual with a utilitarian lens, valuing them based on a few narrow functions they can execute for the benefit of natives, rather than human beings and unique individuals capable to contribute in unforeseen ways. This is an approach that cuts across political views, and even liberal politicians frame their suggestions this way. This was felt as a very dehumanizing approach by itself that will always hold us back from achieving true change. So how could we reframe the public conversation around immigration to shift back to a place of humanity instead of this utilitarian lens? Okay, let's start with Shadia. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think this is a really important observation and question, and there are a lot of problems in the way that public conversation around immigration is framed. And for example, the way that labor migration or skilled migration is discussed and differentiated from migration based on, for example, humanitarian reasons. And I would say, like, to reframe the public conversation, first, it's important to become aware that this is a problem. And we need to see how this framing is actually a continuum, and it has historical roots. It's important to read and hear scholars outside of the Eurocentric frame, so we don't overlook what's attracting highly educated persons by the masses actually does to sending countries, so the problem of so-called brain drain. And specifically, if we're thinking about unemployment among immigrant women and how this is discussed on a very individual perspective, in a sense, like victim blaming and asking the question of who is not working when we should be asking why, and what are the barriers, what are the reasons. That's also related to the problematic narrative in public conversation. And finally, I think it's really important that discussions around migration need to recognize and more strongly center around human rights. So the fact that everyone has a right to leave a country and return to their country, and also the right to seek asylum from persecution. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's take Sanna next.
Thank you. Very, very interesting comments from Shadia. Again, this is not my field, discussing the discussion. But I do believe this is not a problem only on when discussing immigration. I think we discuss this in the similar way of unemployment as a whole, or social security issues as a whole. So I wouldn't personally call it dehumanizing, but kind of maybe de-individualizing, or so, that we group people to represent only unemployed person. And I have to say that that's a methodological issue too. That's a bit how we often do in economics, that we don't talk about individuals, but we talk about a representative individual. And I'm not giving that up, because we also need to be able to approach things systematically from, like, taking the big picture. But I'm all in favor of more diverse ways to discuss. And but I still, even from Shadia's comments, I kind of lack the I still don't know how. I mean, what are the concrete examples on how we could, if we talk about in like a talk about the big picture. I mean, your introductory videos were really nice, really well done and very interesting to hear. But we can't discuss like society's big issues by just only by bringing individual people to tell their story, because we need like that big picture. How do we get the big picture without generalizing, without taking the statistics? I don't know.
That's really good points. Shadia, do you want to answer to Sanna's comment here?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, good questions and comments. I just wanted to answer to the like question of whether it's dehumanizing or not. I would say that in Finland, it is very common in the public conversation and discourse, especially if you're a racialized person, a person who is not white, that kind of your existence in Finland is only approved or accepted if you excel, if you're excellent, and if you kind of fail to be brilliant and exceed all expectations, then kind of your right to exist in our society is challenged. And to me, that's the dehumanizing part of this discourse. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's have Vaishali next.
Yeah, very touching comments from Shadia here, and I kind of empathize with that feeling that if you're a person of color, you have to be best, you have to excel, or it's very easily generalized into one immigrant box. And I feel that it is not fair to color the whole box with the same color or one size fits all, because the immigrants that come are in a wide range. There are people who have civil wars in their countries and they have come here as asylum seekers or refugees. But then there is also the high-skilled immigrants. Like, at least if I look at my friends or my people who have come from India, they are all high-skilled double masters, PhDs who come here for research or some high-end work. So categorizing it all into one umbrella, or they are good for this job or that job, is kind of not humanitarian in my mind. And I was even like shocked. I like telling stories, so I can just say that due to Corona, nowadays we all are working from home, and the person who comes to clean at my place, who comes every other week, was a guy from Iraq. And I got to know while talking to him that he's an Air Force pilot. But it seems the law says that they could only do cleaning job for first 3 or 5 years when they are in Finland. I'm not getting into details of that, but that's kind of really a discrimination. He's a skilled worker. I'm not saying give him job in Air Force, but if you make him do, okay, we give you a place to come here and then you just do the cleaning, is also not fair and quite discriminatory in my mind.
Thank you, Vaishali. Annukka.
Okay, the Teams is slowing down apparently a bit. There's a very interesting discussion also going on the chat. I really like this kind of possibility to be in multiple channels. So thank you, pandemic time, for some good things. And I understand all the frustration. I feel it personally greatly as well. And this is a country that has these kind of Lutheran traditions and thinking of work and being that this utilitarian culture is really strongly somewhere in the roots, and I think that's all like unnecessary, and we should move the whole country to the 2000 million, how do you say, like the 21st century and beyond. And we should all start thinking it's not only the immigrants that are thought of, like how much do you pay taxes and how much. This touches also the local community, but unfortunately this is more visible on the immigrant sides, and it's more put to fore on the political discussion that but what's the benefit that the immigrants bring, and how much does one person pay taxes and so on. And this is really, really unfair. But how can we turn this frustration to empowerment? This is a key issue that I'm really interested in looking at, and how can we support positivity and positive change and not only put our finger to the negative issues. One detail that is problematic in this setting from the municipality side is time. So the time span on which we work in municipality is that, okay, now we are in April and we are planning to do something in August. So that will happen, we need to start the planning work now. We need to convince the politicians that these are good things, that these are issues that we must pay attention to. But meanwhile, in the life of a single person, this time span of 6 months, for example, is massive. And from that perspective, it is very, very hard to stay positive if we say that, okay, maybe in 1 year we will have something better. So of course, in 1 year, everything already happened. So this lens is very, very hard. But I really hope that people find some way to build motivation to stay positive. Things are really changing. I started a year ago this work. Already in 1 year, massive things have been starting, and people are really starting to say that this is important, this is something we must do. And I truly believe that the big change has happened. And I encourage everyone to stay positive, find the force perhaps from the frustration, but somehow to build like a positive future.
Thank you, Annukka. And this is a really, really great bridge to our next question, which is, what kind of solution would you suggest for improving the current situation? How can we make Finland more inclusive towards immigrant women? Let's start with Shadia.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a really good question, and Sanna also raised it. I think, Vaishali, you mentioned like the strong business case for diversity and inclusion. That's one solution. So really bringing forth information and the evidence that this is something that benefits organizations, adds to innovations, helps in finding new client groups and financial profit. But at the same time, we shouldn't overlook like the moral case, moral reasons why inclusion, diversity, equality in the labor market is needed. And I think that's also a solution. So really tying these values into the strategy of organizations. And for example, at THL, pioneering inequality is one of the main values that's written into our strategy. And that really gives us leverage and also like guides our work and the decisions that we make. And then I also want to add that in addition to like individual efforts and staying positive and polishing CVs and networking, etc., I really do think that the solutions need to be structural. So these like barriers to employment cannot be solved just with individual efforts, but we need the solutions at workplaces. And this is what we're doing and developing for our part in the Manifold More project. Examples of concrete solutions are like diversity promoting recruitment practices. So in our own recruitment experiment, we tried having a diversity clause in our job application to explicitly encourage people of different backgrounds, different ages, belonging to minorities to apply to our position. And we critically assessed the level of language, Finnish language, that we require. We used anonymous recruitment or anonymous sample text. So really trying to tackle the unconscious bias that exists in all of us from the recruitment process, and focusing on the skills that are presented to us through this one-page research abstract, and also using like multiple recruitment channels. So whereas usually in THL we advertise open positions at valtiolle.fi and then our own website, and it doesn't necessarily reach like a very diverse pool of potential candidates. So what we found was that when we were actively sharing our open positions on social media in groups like International Working Women of Finland, for the 2 positions that we had opened last year, we received 120 applications, and the pool of applicants spoke 26 different first languages, and were extremely highly educated and competent. So these are practical solutions how we can improve the current situation, and focusing on recruitment. But then there are a lot of different other phases, for example, in work culture, but I won't share more about that. I'll let the others also share.
Thank you, Shadia. I really love the very concrete action steps, because very often we just talk about like, oh, we should be more inclusive and we should appreciate diversity more, but there's nothing concrete. Whereas, for example, in recruitment industry, a big discussion is around, like, for example, anonymous CVs, or how can like diversity programs are diversity programs actually working in recruitment? And there are great studies about them that they are working, and we're still basically having the conversation. So I feel like we're at the we're taking the very first steps in Finland as a country to really truly promote diversity and inclusion. Let's take Sanna next.
Thank you. I agree. I was so happy to hear Shadia's suggestions, because they're so concrete. I also get quite frustrated from comments like, we need to change the attitudes, because that's usually a slow process. But I'm actually quite confident that we can make a systemic change here also, because it's a clear win-win situation. So I think there's a lot of just by bringing the problem more visible to employers, what Shadia's work is also doing, then I think we can get a change there, and that employers realize that it's also their advantage that they find new ways to recruit, to reach the talent that is already in this country. But the other suggestion I had in my policy paper was that we need to improve the employment services. And I haven't been following very closely the chat, but I just quickly noticed that there was some comments saying that the job seeker services in Finland are totally horrible, and that's my impression too about the situation. What I hope that Annukka's work and hopefully also in other cities, that the municipalities are now taking more responsibility of job seeker services, that maybe they could bring it to more closer to the job seekers themselves. And there's also been the government has already promised a lot of more resources to these services. What I'm worried about, I don't know, maybe Anuka can comment on that, is that when these services go to the communities, yeah, it's a good thing that they're closer to people, but how about the kind of sharing of best practices between the municipalities? And I think we could also use some kind of maybe machine learning techniques to kind of pick the job seekers for different services. Some benefit from wage subsidy, some benefit from language education, some benefit from professional education, that we would need to better to figure out which job seekers need which kind of services, and that's a challenge.
So if I'm able to reply to that before we go to the Q&A. These municipality tryouts are now for 2.5 years, and they are done in 30 different municipalities around Finland. I did post on the chat the link from the employment service site where you can see whether your municipality makes part of it or not. And in these services, the idea is to generally see on a country level that what are the actions that function, what are the ways of also targeting the services, so what kind of background information do we need to offer the best option for an individual? Is it depending on the country of origin? Is it depending on the level of the education? Is it depending on the knowledge of English or Finnish? We don't know this yet. So this is something that we are currently looking at, that what kind of service, what kind of, is it offering better networking services? Is it offering better job seeking services? What is the detail that functions best for which individual? Of course, on a personal level, this is not always the best solution, but on a country level, this is a shift that we are aiming to do, that we would have more targeted services. The current employment service, we don't want to talk about that, I would say, because I've also experienced the choice of it, and there's nothing that is targeted, so is the same for everyone. That doesn't function, unfortunately. So what is currently on a country's level, we try to see that, okay, how can we then target the services so that they function?
Great, thank you very much. Vaishali.
Yeah, so just to sum it up, like you all said, Anuka, Sanna, Shadia, that it is a collective problem and everybody's responsibility, as we say. One is an individual, we agreed what they should do. It's good to know what the government is doing or what the cities and THL and others are doing. But again, coming from the corporate side, I feel it's also a strong corporate responsibility, how we do it, how we change our narrative. At least like every organization has a target, this much we are going to grow and this much revenues we are going to make. Which organization is making inclusion and diversity as one of their top priorities or criteria? And then again, how do we incentivize them? I don't know, do they get some tax subsidies if they have more diverse workforce or more women working in their organization? So I think those kind of things should be incentivized by the government. Maybe, like I can take an example back in India. So they put the quota to the government sector that if you're working in public sector, you need to have X% of women working. But how do they incentivize private sector? Then they give tax subsidies that if you have X% of women or immigrant population or diverse population, you get this and that subsidies. And then the organizations will change their narrative if an organization is not mature to see the soft benefits of it. So I guess that could be also one angle that needs to be looked into by the politicians or by the government.
Thank you, very good ideas. Sanober.
Yeah, just to keep it brief, I think there is a sort of barrier, the barrier depending on the fact that how much knowledge or resources are actually available easily, especially in English, for the immigrant person to understand how the employment market is moving around in Finland. That understanding, it takes a lot of time. Personally, when I started into the employment market and put myself as a job seeker, there was quite a lot of challenge. One, basically, that the employment market, they never saw anybody as a specific skill set. It was like a united one kind of a whole thing. And I think because they are looking at as one whole thing, the really highly skilled experts are maybe, missed out. I wouldn't say neglected, but missed out in that fact. And that's where, the too much time is taken to help them into progressing and how they can expand their skills and things like that. It takes a big effect. And when a really highly skilled person has to wait and wait, even though he or she has like over 10 years of experience, you need to be motivated some way to progress ahead. And I think if the labor market gives a proper material in English, especially to all the immigrants who come in Finland, then that would also create a great inclusive kind of an environment and also show that they are ready to be diverse, they're ready to welcome international talents, and I think then things can move ahead much smoother.
I'm also wondering, as a follow-up question from Sanober, is that how much are we using actually? How much are we employing immigrants in the unemployment services? So how, because they are truly the experts in experiencing this, is it mostly from Finns to immigrants, or are there also immigrants offering services to immigrants? Let's take Vaishali and then Annukka.
Yeah. Maybe I don't have an answer to that question, but that is very much linked to what I wanted to comment, because we are talking about networking. That's what we started, that why there is a challenge. And I'm feeling that this networking is also happening in closed circles. There are immigrants networking with immigrants. Okay, there are we have many Finnish people on this panel discussion as well, but how much of these kind of cross networking is happening? There's International Working Women of Finland, there's Indian Women of Finland, but they are all immigrant dominated networks. And I think one thing we need to see is how do we merge it with the local networks or local societies, because that is a conscious effort again we need to figure out. I don't have an answer how, but that is also something. Then we get into the inner circle and then we know what's happening and how to move around, I guess.
Thank you. Annukka, go ahead.
So I can only speak from the city of Espoo perspective, and there is awareness in the city that only through example can we show and change. And currently, as I mentioned also on the chat, so this anonymous recruiting is one way that we can try. It's not, of course, a key to success in all manners, but this is one way. This removes some of the barriers, maybe not all of them, but that's one way. There isn't a way from the municipality side that we could put on the job post that we favor immigrants. So this is not an option. So that's this kind of open positive discrimination can happen in some company field, but from the municipality not. But there are certain parts where they mention, for example, that a high knowledge of another language is favorable, and these are details that you can pay attention to that actually mean that we want to hire an immigrant, but it cannot be said on a job announcement from the municipality side in another way. This is one way that we try to do something about it, but of course, again, that this is a very slow process.
Thank you very much. Now it is time to move on to the questions, so Q&A part. So everyone feel free to ask your questions in the chat. We already have some really good questions here, and I would like to start with the first one. So a question to all panelists. What kind of data collection would you allow to gather more insights on the problem and ways to help? For an example of this is race or ethnicity is a sensitive variable to collect on an individual, but can these problems be solved without having that data? Do we have Shadia here? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. A very good question, and I think it's important. kind of slogan that you get what you measure. So really measuring, having data, having evidence is important. Two angles or thoughts. Coming from a research institute, we have frequent population surveys where we get a sample from based on the population register and through the questions interview or questionnaire, we get information, for example, about barriers to employment and self-reported obstacles that for example, people of foreign origin report. And I think that's something which is key. It gives us a picture of the current situation, and what's even more important is having like trend information, so we know which direction we're going to. And then from the perspective of like individual companies or organizations, yes, this is definitely a sensitive topic. There are examples like internationally and for example from the US where it is like more common or mainstream to have to collect like statistics on personnel, not only from the perspective of gender or age, but also for example, ethnicity or race. I think an important aspect is having or relying on self-report. So not making assumptions based on name or country of origin if we're talking about like statistics on diversity in personnel, but having self-report questions. So then a person has the option of not replying or choosing the answer or option that they reply. So those ideas, but all in all, I think it is very key that we do measure and have evidence on the status of diversity.
Thank you. Sanna.
Yes, I'm thinking about mainly from the research point of view and kind of statistical point of view, how can we improve and target labor market services or things like that. I don't think we need any more data like on ethnic background or something like that. One thing Finland is good at is having registers about everything. So we already know the first language of everyone. Of course, there might be some small errors in statistics, but still, like mostly we know if a person is Finnish speaking, Swedish speaking, or speaks another language, and I think that's enough. We don't need any more like data on ethnicity, but I think we're just not utilizing enough the data we already have, and we can just do much more on that to for example to target the services.
Thank you, and let's take Anuka's comment.
In my research, I'm looking at these background issues in order to make it sure that I have a diverse enough opinion coming from the people I interview, for example, so that I'm sure that it's not biased, that I don't only interview people from Europe, for example, that there's different age groups, there's different nationalities, there's different experiences on how long people have been in Finland or did they just move to here. So these are all the kind of variables that affect also whether they were already customers of the employment services or not. That has actually a quite big impact because many people have had negative experience earlier on the current employment services, as we can also see through the chat. And this first bad impression is actually showing that it has a very high impact on people's opinion. And here comes the earlier mentioned frustration also. And this is something that I'm trying to look at, that how can we change this more supportive and looking at people's well-being in general.
Thank you. Let's take Sanober's comment and then move on to the next question.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with Sanna. Yes, Finland does have a great registry of, these common details of all the immigrants and locals. But the fact is that how much of it is actually being used positively to develop a strong employment market. And I think if the change happens at least a bit gradually or in a constant stable way in Finland, then things can improve very slowly for even the immigrant backgrounds. And this data that is already collected can actually benefit and be in a positive way for everybody. So I think, yes, data should be collected. It is very important to understand what backgrounds and what ethnicity and where people are coming from, what is their strength, and then things can be moved accordingly to make the employment market more richer for the immigrant talents.
Thank you. There are actually two questions that we could maybe combine. Startups and big corporations are more international and diverse by nature, but how about the small and medium-sized companies? So how could we lower the barrier and encourage in positive way, especially the small and medium-sized businesses in Finland, because they obviously they are the biggest part of all companies that we have in Finland. And then second question here is a follow-up question. So also in a lot of organizations, women have faced the situation where the salary has been lower than the unemployment allowance. So is there maybe in the small and medium-sized companies, is there also are they missing awareness on what's discrimination and what is illegal and legal when it comes to hiring, or is this just exploitation of international talent in the market? Annukka.
What I've seen in my interviews with companies, so I've talked with companies who already have an experience on and good experience on hiring diverse people and making their business very inclusive. So they are saying that only by sharing with peers, so only by having platforms where this information could be shared to other companies, so this would be the best way to help the SMEs also to become more diverse. I am currently trying to push these kind of ideas of facilitating platforms also in the city of Espoo, but I think we are not the only place where this should happen, that would be necessary that many municipalities would do that, and also companies even without the municipalities' help or example, so that there would be a growing not only interest but a way to share these kind of best practices on a really day-to-day example level, that okay, or that the employer offers possibilities to like Shadia posted that there's the language training part as part of the contract, but also like invite the person to have a lunch. So these can be very simple examples. So peer mentoring for companies would be my answer in short.
Thank you. Vaishali.
Yeah, I think Anuka, it was spot on. So peer mentoring, because why are startups more diverse? Because startups usually have a lot of mentoring. They have a lot of startup ecosystem. They have a lot of knowledge sharing and stuff. And then they know what works when you are a startup, what doesn't work. And then they are always like inclusion, diversity is in one of their top 3 or 4 like criteria. Bigger organizations have the funds, have the money, they've invested, they have dedicated people focusing on inclusion and diversity, so they can do it. But I know this challenge with the SME sector, and I think peer mentoring or as a responsibility of bigger organizations also to like educate or be evangelists towards the SME sector is needed. At least our big organizations go and do this on a day-to-day basis with our clients, because our clients are not all big organizations, they are SMEs. And we go and tell them, show them the importance. How is the big organization benefiting if you go that road? And change is happening, but it is slow. People are resistant to the change, but I think we need to speak more about it, educate more about it. That's the way for the SMEs at least.
Thank you. Shadia.
Thanks. I just wanted to comment the question related to whether there are like double standards in the labor market and offering lower pay. Of course, I'm not able to comment like a specific case. I'm not aware about the details, but like all in all, I do think it is important to like recognize that we have problems in the labor market. And for example, like work tryouts, there is lots of examples where they're like not working the way they should be working. So the idea is that it gives an opportunity for a person to show their expertise and like gain skills in a company and optimally will lead to employment. And there are lots of examples where actually it's used as like against the initial idea and as kind of free employees without leading to employment or a contract. So I think it is important to be open about these challenges and issues and problems that do exist and that are particularly like related to immigration and if we think about immigrant background women, so kind of being trapped in just being offered work tryouts or practice or internships without achieving or reaching employment, and then like also employment that matches the education level. So just wanted to comment that.
Thank you very much. There's so many great questions, but I think it's probably time to move on to our final question. So the municipal elections are coming and up in Finland, and some of the internationals in our conversations have put themselves forward as candidates in order to push the international talent agenda. Do you have any concrete suggestions for policies they should advocate in Finland? We can also drive this forward with the other even the Finnish candidates that we have in the municipal elections. Let's start with Vaishali.
Yeah, I already mentioned about it. So incentivize the corporations or the organizations if they have more diverse talent with regards to ratio between men, women, or even in the diverse women network, more immigrant women, then they are incentivized in some or the other ways, be it tax subsidies or I don't know, some other perks that they get. I'm not a lawmaker here, not an expert in this, but that could be one way, incentivizing the corporations to recruit more diverse workforce.
Thank you. Great point. Then let's take Sanna.
Thanks. Especially now with the municipalities that have now the tryout on taking responsibility of the labor market services. In those municipalities, you could put more effort on targeting the services, and there is a lot of research that we know which things work for which kind of groups. Like immigrants without networks do benefit a lot from wage subsidies, but it must be the private sector to avoid this kind of what Shadia described, this kind of useless tryouts in some public sector where there is actually no prospect for permanent employment. So private sector wage subsidies, skilled professionals, and then education for low-skilled immigrants are my suggestions.
Thank you. Let's take Annukka.
My advice is not to hide behind the institution. So what we've recently discovered in an article that will be published is that there's these hindrances to inclusion that come from taking the institution as an excuse, or saying like, yes, but these things are slow, like, yes, but well, this is so complicated, yes, but the law doesn't allow us. Of course, this can be or is a fact at some times, but we should more think to further that how can we then change it? If the institution is preventing us from doing something, what is the change that we need to do? And where is the starting point? And some of these things, the answers can be found on including different stakeholder groups to the discussions, to going to the people themselves and asking the users that, okay, what are the reasons? What are the issues you are facing? What would, from your perspective, be the solution? If as an immigrant representative to the council, one has personal experience from these issues, but also those personal issues are not the only issues. So as already mentioned, it's not a homogeneous group, but there are many things that affect, and taking this to the fore would be one way to do the change.
Thank you. Did we have Sanober? Did you raise your hand? Yeah.
Yeah, well, again, focusing on the language side, giving the opportunity of English being used in a more wider scale, especially maybe also supporting SMEs to provide some sort of language courses, especially for like students who have just completed their course or graduation. They don't have time to take up maybe say the integration course or private Finnish classes or something like that. If the support is given to the SMEs to provide that kind of a course would also be beneficial. But of course, giving the opportunity of diversifying their environment and bringing English into their culture slowly and steadily. Of course, it takes time and it's a little demotivating. But if these things can be put across and given support for, then it could be a good change.
Thank you very much, Shadia.
Thank you. I would have two pieces of advice. The first being that pay attention to representation. So who's involved in your campaign as your advisors around the tables and platforms where you have influence. So really making sure diversity and inclusion is present there, who's included and who's left out. And then my second piece of advice would be advocating for strategic commitments. So, for example, the city of Helsinki, but also other municipalities have set strategic targets, for example, that their personnel should reflect the age structure, gender structure, and also the proportion of non-native Finnish speakers should reflect that of the population in that municipality. And those are really important steps. Then we have something which is a goal and something which is measured. And actually, Anuka touched upon the topic of positive discrimination and whether, that topic and the city of Helsinki does have a pilot related to that, and the mayor of Helsinki was just a couple of weeks ago on Yle show talking about why also positive discrimination is one option and can be used in the public sector and is tried out right now in Helsinki. But that is of course not the only solution, as is not anonymous recruitment, but we need different measures that are in use simultaneously so that the problems and obstacles can be solved.
Thank you so much to all our wonderful panelists today and all the participants. So great to see so many of you there, and just checking briefly the chat, it was very, very active. So thank you so much everyone for participating today. It was a really great pleasure. I think we got some really good higher level advice here. So how we should change the laws and policies and strategies, but also some very concrete steps. And I'm very happy that this diversity and inclusion discussion is I would say that it's in the starting phase in Finland, but it is starting, and that is great to see. So I think we're taking the right steps when we are raising these topics, and we should do that in our own organizations and in our own networks as well. And that is how we can truly change the discussion and move towards the thought that having a wide representation of different groups and different age groups, different genders in our workforce will only make us stronger, and it will only be it will be a benefit to the organization. So thank you for today on behalf of Nordic Diversify as well, and we hope to see everyone in our upcoming events as well. So we're planning on organizing a next one in about a month's time. And thank you so much for all the panelists, and I hope everyone a great week ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.